You're not going to believe what just happened. In a move that's already sending shockwaves across the globe, Canada and China have announced a joint decision to immediately ban U.S. oil shipments to 150 countries. Yes, you heard that right, 150 countries. This isn't just another round of trade tensions or diplomatic bickering. This is a major coordinated strike with massive global consequences. And it's already shaking energy markets from Asia to Africa. Before we break down how this happened, what it means, and where it's going, make sure you subscribe, tap the like button, and turn on the bell. Because what you're about to hear might not make it to mainstream headlines, but it could affect your wallet, your country, and your future. What sparked this global energy shock? Tensions between the US, Canada, and China have been building for months. It all started when the US imposed new tariffs on imported tech, metals, and raw materials, targeting Chinese imports first, but eventually catching Canadian industries in the crossfire. Canadian pipeline technology, refinery software, and cross-border logistics were suddenly under US scrutiny. And when Washington added energy sanctions into the mix, the diplomatic temperature soared. Behind closed doors, both Canada and China had enough. In a rare show of unity, they decided to take matters into their own hands and strike back. The result? A sweeping embargo that cuts off US oil shipments from reaching 150 global destinations. Not just a few allies. Not just a few rival states. We're talking about some of the most energy-dependent countries on Earth, many of which have relied on US crude for decades. How can Canada and China ban US oil globally? It might sound strange at first, how could two countries stop US oil from going to other nations? But when you look closely, it makes perfect sense. Canada and China are key players in the global shipping industry. Together, they control or influence dozens of critical shipping lanes, oil ports, and logistics chains. Chinese shipping giants like COSCO and Canadian transport firms jointly manage tankers, cargo routes, and offshore refueling stations. With this announcement, those networks are now off-limits to US oil. They've also pulled back on marine insurance, oil trading platforms, and shared pipeline partnerships. That means if a US oil tanker needs refueling, a port entry, or even legal clearance in certain parts of the world, it may suddenly find itself shut out. Immediate fallout, nations left scrambling. This isn't just some diplomatic jab, it's already creating chaos. Countries like Bangladesh, Morocco, Vietnam, Peru, and Kenya, where US oil made up more than 60% of fuel imports, are in a panic. Energy ministers are calling emergency sessions. Shipping schedules are frozen. Power grids that rely on US fuel are at risk of blackouts. Some ports are reportedly stranded with empty fuel reserves, and gas stations in rural regions are hiking prices by over 20%. And that's just the beginning. Some countries are now turning to Brazil and Russia for emergency shipments. Others are trying to reopen deals with Saudi Arabia. But this rapid reshuffling of supply chains is causing bottlenecks, and global prices are already creeping up. Washington reacts, shock and stalemate. In the US, the response was swift but shaky. The White House called the move reckless and hostile, but didn't announce any clear retaliation yet. That's because the options are limited. Retaliating with more tariffs could only make things worse. And diplomatic talks are complicated by the US's already frayed relations with China, and now, awkward tensions with its neighbor Canada. Privately, many in Washington didn't expect Canada, one of the US's oldest allies, to take such a dramatic step. But according to some Canadian officials, this move had been on the table for weeks. One senior diplomat was quoted saying, "We warned them. They pushed too hard. Now we're responding on our terms." BRICS, the silent hand behind the curtain. While the spotlight is on Canada and China, there's another player orchestrating the bigger picture, BRICS. The economic bloc of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa has long dreamed of ending US dominance in global trade. And now, they're using energy as the tool to make it happen. Sources say the oil shipment ban was discussed at a recent BRICS economic strategy meeting. Brazil and Russia were in full support. India, though publicly neutral, is already expanding contracts with Canadian and Brazilian suppliers. South Africa, meanwhile, is hosting a BRICS Energy Summit next month aimed at replacing US supply routes with BRICS-only agreements. This move could mark the beginning of a new oil order where American influence is sidelined, and the global energy market shifts toward Asia and South America. Why this could be worse than an oil embargo? We've seen oil embargoes in history. The 1973 OPEC oil crisis comes to mind. But this one is different. It's not about cutting supply, it's about rerouting global trust. When 150 countries suddenly lose access to US energy and are forced to rebuild supply chains, they're not just losing a fuel source, they're losing a longtime partner. Experts are warning that this could result in a permanent shift away from US oil in dozens of developing economies. And if these countries begin pricing their oil in Chinese yuan, Russian rubles, or even BRICS-backed digital currency, the damage to the US dollar could be enormous. Winners and losers, who gains, who suffers? Not everyone is coming out as a loser in this energy shakeup. Countries like Canada are benefiting, with their oil now in high demand across Europe and Asia. China is gaining significant power by tightening its control over global shipping and logistics networks. Russia and Brazil are also stepping in as alternative oil suppliers, ready to fill the gap left by the US. Meanwhile, the BRICS alliance is growing stronger, both politically and economically. On the losing side, the United States stands to lose billions in energy revenue and global influence. Developing nations are struggling due to a lack of infrastructure needed to switch suppliers quickly, and global consumers, especially those in energy-poor regions, are being hit hardest by rising fuel prices. Inside the US, industry shockwaves and lobbying frenzy. Back home, US oil companies are in a tailspin. Energy giants like ExxonMobil, Chevron, and ConocoPhillips are watching international contracts evaporate. Storage tanks are filling up, shipments are being rerouted or cancelled, and stock prices are dipping. Lobbyists are now flooding Capitol Hill, demanding the White House de-escalate the trade war and reconsider sanctions that triggered the backlash. Industry leaders are also calling for emergency subsidies or fast-track deals with unaffected allies like Japan or Australia to absorb excess inventory. What happens next? The situation is far from over. According to senior analysts and insider sources, what we've seen may only be the beginning. Behind closed doors, talks are already underway about a possible phase 2 of this energy confrontation. If these plans move forward, the consequences for the US could hit closer to home. Reports say Canada and China are now weighing bans on critical components used in US oil production. These aren't symbolic, they're strategic moves to hit America where it matters most, its ability to produce and refine oil. Among the targets are oil drilling tools made with global supply chains that depend heavily on Chinese materials. If those parts are restricted or delayed, drilling operations could stall. Next on the list is refinery software, an essential part of modern energy infrastructure. These systems control pressure, flow, temperature, and chemical levels. Many rely on foreign coding talent or partnerships that include Chinese or Canadian firms. Cutting off access or updates could trigger production slowdowns or shutdowns. Fuel additives are also at risk, chemicals needed to convert crude oil into usable fuels. Many of these come from Chinese firms. If exports are blocked, US refineries could be stuck with millions of barrels of crude they can't process. Now imagine this: oil is in the ground, rigs are ready, and workers are on site. But without drilling parts, updated software, or essential chemicals, the whole operation stalls. This would turn a supply chain crisis into a domestic production disaster. Refineries might shut down. Gas prices could soar. And Americans would feel the sting right at the pump. What began as an international standoff could quickly become one of the most serious oil crises the US has faced in decades. Global market reactions and price shocks. Oil futures have already jumped 12% in 48 hours. Wall Street is jittery. European energy ministers are holding emergency talks. India and Indonesia are racing to lock in stable long-term contracts. Analysts say that if the standoff lasts more than 3 months, it could push Brent crude beyond $110 per barrel. If this turns into a full-scale energy Cold War, prepare for long-term inflation in heating, electricity, and travel worldwide. Final thoughts: a new energy world emerging. This isn't just a supply chain disruption. It's a signal. The world's energy map is being redrawn, and the US is no longer the sole architect. Canada and China's bold move has cracked open the door for a future where power doesn't just flow through pipelines, but through politics, shipping lanes, and international unity. BRICS is watching. Washington is reeling. And the rest of the world? They're choosing sides. Make no mistake, this moment will be remembered as the beginning of something bigger. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We'll be tracking every twist in this global shift.